There are many who said, I want to be the leading cellist in the world.
So in music, there is no such thing as this is the greatest anything, because it's about learning forever.
What about where you play?
You don't have to be there. I don't have to be there. So if we're going to spend time together, let's make it count.
Would you fix your tie, please?
Well, people wouldn't recognize me if my tie was fixed, but okay. Just leave it this way. All right. I don't consider myself a journalist, and nobody else would consider myself a journalist. I began to take on the life of being an interviewer, even though I have a day job of running a private equity firm. How do you define leadership? What is it that makes somebody tick? Thank you very much for coming here today. We're at the Kennedy Center. You've played here many times, I assume?
Once or twice.
Well, I'm very honored to be interviewing you because I'm the chairman of the Kennedy Center, and we gave you the Kennedy Center honors at one point not too long ago, and you've also been the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom and every other award one can get. You're traveling around the country, around the world all the time. What drives you so much at this point when you're already so successful?
I want my wife to approve of me.
That's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, that could be, the ultimate prize. Well, I think what probably drives me is I want to be useful. So I play the cello, and people like me to play, and but maybe something you don't know is that my great passion through playing the cello, through doing music, is the fact I'm incredibly passionate about people.
Well, I do know that in part because when I first met you, you didn't want to shake hands, you like to hug. And I know
so I'm a hugger.
You're a hugger, and so that shows you're passionate. And when did you adopt the hugging technique? Did you always have that?
Well, in France, you kiss.
Oh.
Right?
So hugging is better.
No, hugging is just like, it's less.
Okay.
Right? You kiss on both cheeks, and, in the United States, we shake hands.
Okay.
So I did something kind of mid-Atlantic-ish.
Okay, so you adopt that. Okay, it works out well, and I'm always happy to be hugged by you.
Okay, great.
You were born in France. You grew up there for a couple years. Your native language was Mandarin or Chinese?
Chinese and
then French?
Yeah.
So you didn't speak English when you were living in France?
Can you tell?
Well, it's perfect.
Well, some people say yes.
So you had an older sister and have an older sister, and she was playing the violin, as I understand it. And so your father said he was a music teacher. Why don't you play the violin as well? So why did you not become a violinist?
Well, first of all, my sister played much better than I did. And there's actually something, I think, in each person that is innate in terms of the kinds of sounds you like, So, for example, I somehow didn't think I could make a good sound on the violin, but so I didn't play any other instrument for a while until I didn't even hear the sound of a double bass, but I saw one, and I thought, as a 4-year-old, that's a big, giant instrument. I want to play it, as 4-year-olds might do.
Okay.
And so I started saying, please give me a double bass, I want to play it. There was no double bass I could play. Cello was the next best instrument.
So you started playing, and did you notice that other children your age were out playing while you were practicing, and did that concern you?
Well, I didn't practice a lot. I had a father who was a very gifted teacher and who thought a lot about things, and one of the things he thought about was efficient practicing. So, for example, the first piece of music I played was this piece. Okay, sounds a little like it's kind of fast, there are lots of notes, but can we make it simpler?
Well, I'm sure you can.
No, but I'm sure you can, because what's the first note? It's this, right? And then the second note is this, and the third note is this. And then there's one fourth note. Okay, now this is the first four notes. Now let's listen to what happens. Four notes, and then the next four notes are, wait a minute, I've heard those notes before. That was the third note, and this was the second note. So basically, if I know how to play the first four notes, it's just a permutation of two of those notes.
You make it sound easy, but it's not that
No,
easy.
but you see, but anybody can do that.
Well,
You can, we'll do that later.
let's go back to your situation. You go to New York. Your father is trying to talk his brother out of moving back to China.
Yep.
But at that time, your father said, geez, this might be a better place for my son to learn how to play the cello.
What happened was that by total coincidence, my sister, who played very well, and I violin, piano, and we did a small performance someplace in Manhattan on our last stop. And this Franco-American lady who had founded an elementary school in New York was looking for a music teacher, had heard about this person, Dr. Ma, and said, I'm kind of interested. She came to the concert and then decided on the spot to ask him to teach at her school. And so had we not met this lady, we would have gone back to France, and I would have,
You might be in private equity.
or I would be kissing you on both cheeks.
Right. You were already fairly accomplished. Now, because we're in the Kennedy...
Depends on how you define
Well,
accomplished.
by almost any normal standards, you were already very well known because you had already met Pablo Casals, who was many people consider the greatest cellist of the 20th century, or at least the first half of the 20th century. How did you meet Pablo Casals, and what did he think of your playing as a young boy?
Well, I think I was taken to play for him at age 7, and I have him, writing something in my autograph book, and I played for him, and he said, very good, and he says, but you should always also go play baseball, and which was very interesting because Casals, at that time he was in his upper 80s probably, and one of the things I remember his saying, maybe in that autobiography or in an interview, he said, I think of myself as a human being first, a musician second, and a cellist third. I thought that was really interesting because, where do we place our identity? For guys, often it's, what do you do? Right? What's your profession? But the fact that he, most people think of me as a cellist. But the human being part for Casals was the most important thing. And that was something I always thought about.
And he recommended you to Leonard Bernstein for an event in Washington.
There has come to us this year a young man aged 7 bearing the name Yo-Yo Ma. Now here's a cultural image for you to ponder as you listen. A 7-year-old Chinese cellist playing old French music for his new American compatriots. Welcome Yo-Yo Ma and Yu Cheng Ma.
You performed at the age of 7 in front of a live TV audience, but also President Kennedy was there. So what was that like? Fairly intimidating?
Well, we were newly arrived people, immigrants. And so I think for a 7-year-old, did I know exactly who President Kennedy was? Probably not. Did I know he was an incredibly important person? Yes. And did I think about this for the rest of my life about who this person was? Absolutely.
What about where you play?
Live music is a communion. You don't have to be there. I don't have to be there. So if we're going to spend time together, let's make it count.
So you're at Juilliard, you're playing with other people, and then you decide ultimately to go to college at Harvard.
The fields I was most interested in were anthropology and archaeology. And you may ask why.
Because they both start with an A, you like the A's?
Exactly. Right. Before getting to the B's, it was, you know. So he's so clever. And so the thing is, I was a very confused child. Because when you move, you know, everything, all the things that you hold to be sort of solid and true visually, you know, emotionally often, but certainly in terms of habits and people, it all changes. You know, the rules are different. People say different things. And so it was, you know, a lot of our French friends couldn't understand why we would move to the United States. And certainly a lot of Americans thought, you know, this is the best country in the world. My parents kept telling me, Chinese culture, so incredibly important. So I was kind of befuddled because, you know, nobody can be, you know, not everybody can be right all the time. But anthropology gave me the way of studying values and cultures that where slight shifts in values create the society and becomes expressive in their arts as well as in all of their various
When you get to Harvard,
expressions.
you realize there are a lot of smart people there.
Yeah.
But were there many of them who said, I want to be the leading cellist in the world? Were you unique? There weren't that many cellists in your class?
I don't even know that anybody, or myself included, wanted to be something like that. There was not, I mean, one thing that's interesting in music is that mastering an instrument is there to serve the purpose of expression. And the purpose of doing something in music is to find your voice. So in music, there is no such thing as this is the greatest anything, because it's about learning forever and finding the most concise way of expressing something as precisely as possible.
You began a career as a leading cellist and played for symphonies and on your own and so forth. As you've done that, you've now recorded, I think, 90-some albums, or maybe more than that.
I don't know.
An
I don't
enormous
keep
number.
track.
You've won 20-some Grammys or something like that. So you've become the dominant figure, the most well-known figure in the classical music world. So does that put a lot of pressure on you to perform up to the highest standard every single time, or can you ever relax a little bit?
You know the phrase that you're only as good as your last performance, right? And some of that is true, because I think what you're talking about, and I don't want to belittle that, is external recognition and facts. Being a musician is internal development, is sort of, you know, there's a tremendous emphasis to say, you collect art. What makes one person that artist and nobody else, right? What makes you David Rubenstein and nobody else? What makes the sounds that I make only possible because of some wish to hear certain sounds a certain way? And I think that's what I spend my life on. And so winning awards is fabulous because it gives you more chances to do something that you might wish to do. You know, we're talking about external recognition versus internal satisfaction and fulfillment. The different levels of pleasure, right? And I think the levels of deep fulfillment, and this is where, you know, the loose term I'm going to use, culture comes along, because if you do things in arts and sciences, in culture, your wish is to build something that's strong enough, a building block that someone else can build on top of.
Today, when you have a life of playing around the world, so how do you pick where to go every year? How far in advance is your schedule set?
I really don't mind what I play and where I play, but I care about how I play and who I play for and with. So, you know, I've kind of decided early on that whether I play, you know, in New York or Jakarta or Peoria or doesn't matter, or in Waco, Texas, the most important thing I can do is to be totally present and totally engaged. There's nothing more important. And so it's the focus that is there. And what that means is not being present in that I'm delivering a package and here's the package, but more like saying, okay, if I play for a group of people, whether it's kindergartners or inner city school, White House, it is, you think about what you're trying to say, who you're saying it to, but the only thing that's important is that they remember something that will make them perform an action afterwards. So it's living material.
Do you ever have the problem that
Okay,
you're
so-
thinking about one thing when you're playing a piece?
When I'm playing, it's about absolute concentration. Nothing.
Right, and so you don't have
interferes
any
with that.
mental lapses, you're playing.
Well,
It's-
I can sometimes feel mental lapses
do
coming
you ever
on.
forget a piece?
but
I mean, you forget the notes. For example, when you play, you don't use music.
I do sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And what I tell people is, if you want to memorize pieces, do that before you're 21 years old. Because whatever you learn before 21, you remember forever. After you're 40, forget it.
Harder. What about where you play? I mean, is there one music hall that you think is better than the other for acoustics, or your plastic?
So again, some people say, okay, this is the greatest hall, therefore it must be fantastic to play. Yes, that gives a certain amount of pleasure, but the greater pleasure is the energy in the audience. Again, we're talking about who you're playing for. Music, live music, is a communion. You don't have to be there. I don't have to be there. So if we're going to spend time together, let's make it count. Because if it doesn't count, if you forget what you did today, tomorrow, and if I forget what I did today, tomorrow, what's the purpose of doing it?
You are seen as a symbol of the importance of culture.
I have to prove it to myself, let alone to the rest of society, that something is worthwhile, that my humanity or my playing 3 notes on the cello means something.
So you obviously made a decision in your career to do more than classical music.
Music to me is expression of ideas, thoughts, and feelings, spatial structures in sound. I do not think of classical music as separate from the rest of the world. I would like to think that classical music is part of world music, which it is not thought of as world music, but I think that classical music is one of the best things the world has invented. And so to make that category different
But do you think
really upsets me. We started as an idea, a group of musicians getting together and seeing what might happen.
the Silk Road Ensemble and Silk Road endeavor that you put together. Can you explain what that was about and why you did that and why it's so important to you?
Well, I think it is a response to the kinds of questions you were asking me about classical music. Sort of, wait a minute, how come? It's like I was asking those same questions of myself, and what I discovered in beginning to find some answers is that, first of all, there are so many ways of expression through sound that have been, some are traditions that are thousands of years old, and there are many classical musics. And I thought that classical music in itself should actually be able to, because that's part of its tradition, to encompass a larger world. And because one thing that music does, it connects people's conscious and subconscious. People respond to music, both emotionally, but also analytically. And so if you can combine both of those things in one form, you can go very deep into communicating content.
You are seen as a symbol of the importance of culture. And is this an important part of your life and your legacy? What you want to do is convince people that music and other kinds of artistic performances are very valuable for society?
Well, it's back to the old question, who are people? Why do people do what they do? And so how do people learn? What's the meaning of why we live? I think that's something I have to actually, it's not a theoretical thing for me, because if I have to play a performance on 4 hours sleep and I have to leave my family 2/3 of the time that we've had children growing up, 2/3. And I know you travel like crazy, man, and you're not crazy, but just a figure of speech. That you better have a good reason why you're doing that. So you get to that existential level, you have to care. You have to have the reasons of why it's important. And as I get older, and as I observe what you're doing, you get more and more involved in societal issues. You think about patriotism, you think about civilization, you think about civicness, civitas. I think so too, but from my angle, from playing little notes. I'm saying, why should that matter when other things are going on? I have to prove it to myself, let alone to the rest of society, that something is worthwhile, that my humanity or my playing 3 notes on the cello means something.
So I want to thank you for what you've done for the country, and thank you for what you've done for the world in bringing people to know much more about the kind of music you perform. And I want to thank you for the Kennedy Center's involvement that you've had. You have been an advisor to the Kennedy Center. You've been very helpful in many other ways.
Well, thank you. Are you ready for your cello lesson?
I am.
Okay. That's it.
Wow.
You did it.
Great. Okay, I'm
Okay.
ready. Thank you very much. It was great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It was great.